Okay, so I have three things. So from you that the listener should learn, change, or do in terms of starting a new venture.
A couple of fronts. One is um, I think you've kind of indirectly alluded to this already in our conversation, and that's the value of the co-founder or co-founders. Right? Obviously, you don't want too many, but you need at least one. And I think that's sort of fairly established wisdom. But I think one thing that's often undervalued and underestimated is the complexity of getting the right fit in co-founder. And it can be quite tough to part ways with the co-founder, especially if you've kind of been together early on and then kind of decide to go your separate ways. So one thing I've done over the last couple of companies I've started is explicitly create a no harm, no foul period of time. Right? Not that it solves all problems, but I generally do a prototyping exercise with new founders, especially if it's a founder I've not worked with before, or I've not had prior sort of, some sort of association with. Fortunately, with my current company, both my co-founders and I work together in different contexts, so I know how well they work, and I know my strengths and weaknesses in the context of theirs. But I think people often underestimate the complexity and the difficulty of finding the co-founder, and it's so important, I think, because as you said, when you having a low, the likelihood that your co-founder is always also having a low is very low, and keeping each other honest is part of sort of the good kind of tension you need. So over the last several years, what I've done is I've actually gone through the prototyping experience with the co-founder, and then collectively deciding, is this going to be worth continuing, right? Did we work well together? And we, like in my current company, for example, even though I'd worked with my co-founders before, we had a no-go like on our calendars, right? After we started working about 3 months out, where we were like, with extreme discipline, we'd get together and go, how did it go, right? Do we like this experience? Are we making progress, even if it's not statistically significant? Do we feel generally good about everything? And I think more often than not, over the last 12, 15 years, when I've advised startups, the thing that causes collapse early on, not late stage, but like early on, has been the kind of co-founder friction and not sort of taking that new dimension, even if you're friends, that new added dimension of being co-founders is a completely new territory. And I think if you don't pay attention to that, I think you're in deep trouble. And you have to find ways to vet your co-founders, but you have to have them, I think. I don't think you can really, you do yourself a disservice by trying to go it alone. It's kind of one thing that I've sort of learned the hard way.
It's very lonely, and you just run out of energy. It's the African saying about, you can go farther together. You don't go as fast, but you go farther.
I think I would agree. The communication overhead and staying in sync does take up energy, but it's well worth the cost, especially early on, where things are just undefined, noisy and chaotic.
And what's your second thing?
The second thing is a melange of things, but is sort of beginning as an outsider in Silicon Valley. I moved here from Texas. Before that, I was in South Carolina. So not exactly sort of the hotbed of entrepreneurial tech, right? But one of the things that was very intimidating is learning to ignore the myth-making that happens in Silicon Valley. And it's kind of a weird thing, right? I don't think you necessarily see this sort of thing if you look at entrepreneur blogs and stuff, right? Because those are the examples of that myth-making. I think it's human nature to sort of say, if you're going to talk about yourself and your endeavors in a public forum, you want to say how positive things, just natural. You don't want necessarily focus on the negatives and all the troubles, right? I think one of the things I found really intimidating early on was wow, everyone is perfect.
Right,
You know,
right.
they founders are perfect, their product market fit's perfect, their designs are perfect, and then why am my thing so terrible? And why is
Why
it
is it
taking
so
me
hard?
this?
Yeah.
Right? Like, you know, one of my earlier companies was a Squarespace before Squarespace, right?
Mm-hmm.
And um, what I did is I literally was on the ground selling, going to restaurants and saying
Mm-hmm.
to the owners, don't you need something where you can update your prices when you don't have to ask your nephew to update it, or your friend you're paying way too much money to kind of create a terrible website, right? And it was such a slog because I just kept seeing these other companies doing so well perfectly, and I was like, I must be doing something wrong
Mm-hmm.
because I'm having a hell of a time getting a mass audience. But even though I think the product is fantastic, right? So I ended up actually not following through on that, even though the functioning product. And I had a few customers, but I didn't have 10,000 customers out there. So one of the things I learned the hard way is ignore some of the myth making, right? Like, and be real about sort of how difficult building things are. Even if you think that you have a dynamite idea, you know it's so hard to prepare for that, right? The amount of work. So, and unfortunately, the blogosphere, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
doesn't help, right? It's very rare you see kind of a more confessional post from an entrepreneur. You know, it's usually even the most negative scenarios. It's like, oh, it's a great journey, and we found a nice landing spot. You know, it's never, oh, we struggled, we couldn't get customer traction, and we just need to get rid of this thing because even though we spent 5 years on it. You know, it's
right.
So I think I would encourage everybody to just fight that myth making that happens and find sort of unpeel that onion and see kind of what's actually happening at these companies, and maybe not get into the comparison game to begin with. You know, not try to sort of
right.
have external yardsticks, which is very difficult to do, admittedly. But having a co-founder who believes in the idea helps a lot, obviously. And the third thing is, I think, this, going back to the earlier topics we talked about today, is the you won't need it philosophy. You know, I tend to underbuild, and I'm prepared for embarrassment and rejection all the time, right? So one of the things I consistently advise other entrepreneurs who come to me and make me feel very, very old is you're building too much. And all the infrastructure, all the people you're trying to get on board within the company, not as customers, but like or services you're trying to provide. You're overbuilding it. Just it should be fine to be embarrassed about what you're doing, right? Most recently last week, I talked to somebody who was looking for 2 or 3 engineers to hire to build their product, and I was like, everything you described could be done by 2 interns at $40 an hour, because there's nothing that complicated about it. In fact, that experience you create with a bunch of human beings, you just to get off the ground, it's going to be better than any technology you put in place. And that was a hard reality for them to swallow, because they were thinking about these complex technological approaches with AI and routing, and whereas just hire people to do it, right? So I think always thinking you won't need it and go with what you already have, is really, really powerful as an ethos, I think, at least early stage startups, and at least, well, the type of companies I tend to build, which tend to be machine learning and data intensive. And I always remind myself, you don't need to start with the all singing, all dancing machine learning system. Just solve the core problem just to get off the ground, and then build towards the most sophisticated technological solution. Validate that there's a problem, and and I think, going to my second point, right, the myth making, the MVP based thinking actually can be misleading, because you need to just focus on basic viability, not the minimalism, right? Because minimalism is not the point. The point is actually
something
viability.
That works.
Build a thing that's viable. It doesn't matter whether it's minimal or not, right? To you, it may seem too much overhead to hire 10 people who are not tech savvy, but get the job done, just because your thinking is technologically viable. No, it's business viability, right? So I always say, just you won't need it. Just see what you can do without, if you didn't have that, right? Don't hire, just do less. And it's a hard lesson
Yeah.
because, especially if you're in love with the idea, it's hard to see it kind of almost disrespected because you didn't spend, eons building it, before you give it to somebody. It's a very
Yeah.
hard lesson.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because we know that in the lab and the institute, but we still have to relearn it again and again and again. Because
I find the same.
it just and the summer was great working with these students because we had a co-op program that wasn't planned. We said, sure, we'll take them, and we made it up as we went along.
Yeah.
But because we did, we learned so much. I mean, let's try that. That failed. That failed. That failed. Okay. Now it's again, as Mark would say, it's that opportunity mapping.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, that was a dead probe. That's a dead probe. That's a dead probe. There's some energy here, or as I say, is there some pull? If I pull in this rope, is there anything on the other side, right? And if there's some tension there, that's like, oh, okay, I think we've got something.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And then you can go with that, but you're just sort of like nothing. Whoa, okay, this is where the energy is. This is where we should go. And I find operating that kind of organic way is a bit of a leap of faith.
Yeah.
But the most interesting things come out of it, as opposed to
Yep.
doing the very predictable thing, because then you're kind of like everyone else. It's like, I mean, we've learned so much in terms of online engagement and online learning and online teaching because we've done everything through Zoom. And we're like big fans of Miro now, and we do this collective intelligence stuff on Miro. But if you'd asked me in January, I didn't know anyone who used it and using it that way, or can you show me an example? It was like nothing. We just stumbled into it, and we started playing with it. It's like learning how to play a musical instrument. You're just blowing through the thing, seeing if you could just make a sound. And it doesn't sound pretty. And then eventually you can play jazz.
Yeah. I think it's funny that letting go of a thing you built over 3 months to try the next thing is just the emotional inertia that prevents you from doing that is such a hard habit to break. Even today for me, so
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll stick to something, and then realize in retrospect, oh wait, I held on to that idea, that belief too long. I should have just moved on to the next thing much quicker, and we would have been here faster. But it just is something so fundamental to the path to success, at least in my book.
Yeah, don't fall too in love with your idea.
Yeah.
The idea is just in service of helping this person achieve what they want. Because a person doesn't actually care about your idea. They care about solving whatever it is that they're trying to solve, right? Yeah. They don't wake up in the morning and go like, what I really need is a Sim City to do this. That's not it. Or they're like, what I really need is, nobody does that. Nobody. Nope. They're saying, I want to be this person. I want to do this thing. And they're jerry-rigging some sort of solution.
Yeah.
Which is ugly. And it doesn't even look like it, because they go, well, it's like when I was a VC, they go, we have no competitors. And I go, of course you do. They're not in the form of a company, but there is a competitive solution. It might be an Excel spreadsheet and a bunch of paper clips.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
But there's a solution.
It's often Excel. Yeah,
right?
This is often Excel. It's like going to be, especially if you're in a data intensive space like I am, almost always look to where Excel is being used inefficiently, and that could be a business. If you can kind of
exactly. So then you go, oh, okay. So all I have to do is be better than Excel.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, and you go, oh, well, that changes the whole thing altogether, right? It's like, whew. It doesn't have to be all encompassing. It just have to be better than Excel and the 3 paper clips.
Yep. Yeah.
But that's the empathy, right? But that's so if you have someone with that lived experience, they go, look, man, let me explain it to you. It just has to be better than this. It has to be 10% better than this. And by the way, it needs to be in our chart of accounts, so we have a budget for it. That was the other insight that I got, was if there's no line item for it,
yep.
there ain't no money.
Yeah.
I mean, in theory, there's money, but the practicalities of how money flows in organizations, how things get financed, it's like, oh, we'll take it out of the training budget. Cool. I will make this solution in the shape of training because
Yeah.
there's budget for training, or I will make the solution in the shape of X because there's a line for X and there's money
Yeah.
in that pot for X.
It's funny to mention that because I was just coaching somebody last week, they're an early stage startup, and I was like, they're trying to sell to enterprise, and I was, and they were trying to create a line item budget for this new service. And I was just like, you do not understand. Yes, it looks like you're just adding a row in Excel, but that is a Herculean task for your target customers, because that's going to require, 5-6 months of a champion in that company. However, if you plug it into this thing that doesn't feel quite right, but good enough, and you reshape your product message to fit that, that's your wedge in, right? Then you build confidence, you show results, and then everything comes to you. Right? Yeah, it's a hard lesson to learn for enterprise selling, especially.
Early in my career, I worked a lot with the procurement office because I had to figure out like, I need to buy computers, I need to do that.
Yeah.
And so I was really good friends with his name was Ben Shu. I remember him. He was wonderful, gregarious. And I go, hey Ben, hey Margarita, how you doing? So I need to buy and being good friends with someone in procurement helped me understand the bureaucracy of how procurement happens because he was a purchasing agent. It's like, all right, so what is it that you want to buy? And okay, here are requirements and our specs, and this is how we do it as an organization. It needs to meet. Like, I had no idea. I just wanted to buy a computer, right? And so understanding it from the inside, and I don't know how many people hang out with procurement and purchasing agents, but purchasing agents are your friend if you're an entrepreneur. If you can understand how that works.
Yeah, it's that's a hard lesson. I think maybe we should, before you try to sell to the enterprise, you absolutely have to understand, that should be the price of entry into the enterprise space. Do you understand how procurement works, how invoicing works, how, and which line item on the budget you fit into on day one versus day 10.
Right. I mean, one of the biggest friction points is you have to get into the system.
Yeah.
Right. It's sort of like, so I always say you just need to want to get into a billing arrangement, a billing relationship with this entity.
Yeah.
Step one, billing relationship. It could be for $500 because the energy, I mean, it's that friction of like they got to set you up as a vendor and they got to do and all these things. But once it's done, they go to the, I need to get another thing from Margarita. Oh, cool. She's a vendor. Boom, 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 done. Boom,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's almost like your quest. It's like your D&D quest. Your first quest is you must get into the vendor database.
Yeah. That definitely
Right?
smooths out a lot. And the accounting codes that your expenses are going to go into. Yeah.
But a good salesperson knows that, right? They should presumably know how to work that, and you need to be easy to work with and responsive on this stuff. And like, what's your Dun and Bradstreet number? What? I need a Dun and Bradstreet number? What's your Sam's code? What? I need a Sam's code?
Yeah. Finding that out late in the cycle can just really kill your business.
Yeah. So find a way to get some kind of billing relationship, however small it is, and then just keep a pulse. Because then you're just another vendor. The objections really go down because, well, yeah, that's just part of our ecosystem of people we do business with all the time, right?
Yeah.
And someone's going chink, with a rubber stamp. Yeah, it's Margarita again. No big deal.
Yeah. That's right.
Hey Raj, thank you for spending the time.
Not at all. This is really fun. Thank you for the advice. I mean, this has been fantastic. This is really great.
You were supposed to give me advice. Okay, I'll catch you next time. And make sure that I get that for you because I know you're going to do something for our PIN boot campers as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'll send you the link to our redlining article. That's one thing I'll follow up with you on. It's quite interesting what we're finding because some of the things we're trying to do in Northern California explicitly accounts for some of that stuff, and it's going to be interesting to see how to push back against some of that stuff that the legacy of redlining and this kind of exclusion still carries to this day, obviously. And so how do we kind of push back against that in a way that's constructive, without
Yeah.
sort of alienating everybody and
I think it's always, BJ Fogg says in terms of behavior design, always help people do the thing that they want to do. And in this case, people want to do the right thing. So
yeah,
our opportunity as designers and innovators is to make it easy.
Yeah.
Make it easy for people to do the right thing, whatever that might be. And I
Yeah.
think there's a huge opportunity right now for entrepreneurs and innovators to provide that in whatever product offering that they have, whatever ordinary thing they have. I say, and by the way, bonus, this product and service embodies inclusion, it embodies equity, it has fairness in it, either because by the way we manufacture, by the way we engage with our stakeholders, by the way we operate. And so you being in this business relationship with us, you help strengthen the whole ecosystem. So this is a positive externality. Right. So I think I think the time has come for that. And I think that people are hungry for that. And to be able to articulate it right now, right? I mean, like literally right now is the moment. So that's my call to action to entrepreneurs who are listening is, make that stuff that you took for granted, make it explicit. Because that is peace data. That's your peace footprint, your positive peace impact.
Thank you so much for your time. This is fantastic. Really good.
Thank you, Raj. Okay, until next time. Thank you.